Welcome, everyone. We've got an incredible program for you guys tonight. I think you're going to be very happy. Pierre Kiecolt-Wahl. Most of you guys don't know me, but maybe from the past. I was on Baywatch. Yeah, I was always the guy drowning. But I was always rescued by Pamela Anderson, right? 25 years ago, Pamela Anderson. That's the one that the guys love and the girls next to them hate. Look, I can't tell you that I'm an actor, but what I can tell you is that I work for the most amazing investment bank, that's Bryan Garnier. And tonight, we are celebrating three things in particular with regard to BG. Entrepreneurship, sticking to a vision, and building something over a quarter century. What we are celebrating is Bryan Garnier's 25 years. Give it up! Look, one small housekeeping item. You've seen this QR code. You really should download that on your phone, because the person next to you that does is going to receive something that if you haven't, one day you're going to regret, because they're going to be very wealthy with their little NFT. So please download that. That's very important. I've got a friend. He was unemployed. He was buying Bitcoin for $5, $6. Now he's on a yacht. I am not. I'm here in front of you, but still fun. Still fun. Look, we've got a great program for you guys. Bryan Garnier, we call ourselves the BGs. I just think that's awesome. I encourage you to stick around, because our founders, Olivier and Greg, are going to come up here later and sing to you some of those great BG tunes. Okay? But you got to stick around for that. And the last thing I want to say is have fun. We've got a great bar. We have hot food later. We have Le Petit Palais. Le Petit Palais. This is incredible. I know for a lot of you French guys, it's kind of like, yeah, buff. The Gallic shrug is what they call it. But I can tell you, for someone like me from Illinois, this is incredible. So let's have a fantastic night. Good thing for you, I'm not the entertainment, and I am only the co-host. So let me bring up my co-host right now. She's a renowned technologist. She's a renowned journalist. She's been writing at the Wall Street Journal, Fortune, Time Magazine. She's an entrepreneur who founded The Innovator, Europe's leading magazine on digitalization. Jennifer Schenker, please, I welcome you to stand next to me. Jennifer. All right. So Jennifer, Let's go back to 1996, the year that Brian Garnier was born. Quite a time. Baywatch reruns none the luck. I remember the DVD player had just come out. What else was in tech?
Well, yeah, the DVD player cost $1,000 back then. The Palm Pilot was being launched.
Hotmail.
Right. Launching mass consumer free email for the first time.
And what about mobile phone technology? You were here in France. They had something pretty particular.
Yeah, so a lot of people in France back then, myself included, were using something called the bebop. And the thing about it was that it only worked if you were close to a transmitter. So we had to wander around Paris looking for poles with yellow, white, or green stickers on them in order to make a call.
Fantastic. Did they try to put a camera on that?
Well, back then, the phones didn't have cameras, but hey, Sony had our backs. They had something called the FD5, which allowed you to share photos 1996 style with a floppy disk. So all you had to do is snap your picture, take the disk out, put it in your computer, upload it, and then hand it to your friend, and voila, your picture went viral, 1996 style.
Fantastic. What about, what else was going on? Music, anything?
Yeah, so we were all dancing to the song of the year, the Macarena.
Oh my God. All right, well, look, I'm glad technology and music have moved along. We've got an amazing program tonight. Why don't you tell us who we're going to have?
Yeah, so we do have an incredible lineup. We've got as our keynote speaker, Andrew McAfee, who is co-founder and co-director of the MIT's initiative on the digital economy and a research scientist for the MIT Sloan School of Management. We have Wondercraft, who the recipient of the Brian Garnier Deal of the Year Award, who is going to wow us with the ability of technology to transform our lives. We're going to have a hypervision show with incredible, awe-inspiring 3D holographics that will show us things floating in the air. And finally, Brian Garnier is going to allow each one of you to join the NFT revolution. So, and after all of that, you're going to be treated to some of France's finest cuisine. So stick around for what I'm sure is going to be a really exciting evening.
And let's welcome Andrew McAfee to the stage.
Celebrate a 25th anniversary tonight. And I think that's in a fantastic time period because the past 25 years have also seen one of the most wonderful and one of the most surprising developments in human history. And that's what I want to talk about tonight. And to start, I want to go back not 25 years, but more than that. I want to go back half a century to the time of the first Earth Day. Earth Day happened around the world in April of 1970, and the reason we declared the first Earth Day was that we were worried. And we were worried about our relationship with the planet that we all live on, the only planet that we have, and the concern was that we were not taking good care of the planet Earth. And if you go back and you read some of the popular books that were written around Earth Day, you see a lot of worry, you see a lot of concern, you see a lot of pessimism. And if you look at what people were saying in 1970 about all of us human beings and our relationship with our planet, you heard a great deal of concern and you heard a great deal of pessimism. And the real deep problem was us. And in particular, the fact that we liked more. We like growth, we like prosperity, we like a higher standard of living. And the problem was that we were having an impact on our planet, and that the impact was getting bigger and bigger and bigger with no end in sight. Something tells me this is a crowd that likes to look at evidence. So let me show you some evidence about our impact on our planet. Here is 170 years of economic growth in America. And I'm going to use American data because it's the stuff that I'm familiar with, and it's pretty high quality. Here's the size of the American economy over 170 years. And so you see what you would expect. Fairly steady exponential growth. This is wonderful. This is where prosperity comes from. This is where growth comes from. This is where a higher standard of living comes from. Here's the problem. If you look at what we were taking from the earth to generate that prosperity, you notice kind of an unusual relationship and kind of a frightening relationship. Here's how much energy we needed year by year to generate that economic growth. Almost a perfect one-for-one relationship. If we home in on the 20th century and look from 1900 to 1970, it almost doesn't matter what natural resource you look at, you see the same pattern. Exponential growth in our consumption and our resource use to support the exponential growth in our resources and our prosperity. And you don't have to be too much of a mathematician to look at this and see a problem. We can't keep taking more from the earth. That was the thinking. We live on a finite planet. We cannot have infinite appetites. So there was this deep pessimism about growth, and in particular, we started to hear the notion that we could not afford to keep doing this. The problem is us. The problem is our growth. We have to walk away from that. As painful as it might be, we have to embrace this philosophy of conscious and deliberate degrowth of less. Because like the slogan says, the only sustainable growth is degrowth. Now, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. We did not do this. In the 50 years since Earth Day, we did not embrace degrowth. We kept on growing. We kept on growing country by country, and we kept on growing around the world. So there's where we were up until 1970. Let's look at what's happened in the years since then. We've continued to grow at almost the same exponential rate. The United States economy is more than 2.5 times as big as it was in 1970. The global economy is more than 3.5 times as big as it was in 1970. We human beings around the world, we like growth. We did not embrace degrowth. Now, that seems like it's going to present some very serious challenges, and we're going to run into some real problems. But let's look at what actually happened. What did we, if we didn't embrace degrowth, what did we do? The fundamental thing that we did was innovate, was develop new technologies and put them to use and solve very difficult problems. I think that's the reason for BG's existence. I want to show you how profound that innovation has been. And to do that, I want to go back to what I think is the most interesting newspaper advertisement ever created. It was an ad for the electronics retailer Radio Shack. This is an ad from a newspaper in 1991. And a couple years ago, somebody actually found a physical newspaper from 1991. He noticed this advertisement, and then he noticed something profoundly interesting about it. He said, there are about 15 separate devices in this newspaper advertisement. 13 of them have vanished. They don't exist anymore. And in particular, they've all vanished into the smartphone. So I carry around one of these now. I don't have a camera. I don't have a camcorder. I don't own any DVDs. I don't have a tape recorder. I don't have an answering machine. I don't own these devices anymore. All of their use, all of their functionality has vanished into this very small mobile device. And the more we look around the economy, the more we see exactly the same phenomenon. We see the old trade-offs vanishing, And we see getting better along every dimension that we care about. There's some phenomenal research about what's been happening to engines in the cars that we drive around. And it used to be, up until recently, that if you wanted a fast engine, you could have one. If you wanted a fuel-efficient engine, you could have one. Or if you wanted a physically small engine, you could have one. But you could not have all three at the same time. That's now changing. Car engines are now getting much, much more powerful. They are simultaneously getting smaller, and they are simultaneously getting more energy efficient. This is technology-fueled innovation. This is what it allows us to do. It allows us to drive cars that use less fuel and fewer natural resources. I'll give you one more example. I can't think of a segment of the global economy that's not witnessing this, that's not witnessing sustained innovation. Here's what's been happening to crop yields. We used to worry about feeding the world, we worry about famines, and with geopolitical events, there are problems. Our ability to feed the world has only increased because our ability to get more out of every acre of land has only increased. So you add all these up, and you come to this conclusion that, wait a minute, maybe we can innovate our way out of this problem. And over the past 25 years, that is exactly what has happened. We have reversed the course of our impact on our planet. Let me show you the evidence for that. And again, I want to go back home to the US, and I want to start by looking at agriculture, one of our oldest industries. The US is an agricultural giant. Our output goes up every year, while at the same time, the amount of fertilizer that we use in total is slowly going down. The amount of water that we use is slowly going down. And the amount of land that we use is going down. We're decreasing all of the inputs while getting more outputs. This is magic. This is what innovation and productivity do to you. That crop acreage line is going down pretty slowly. How big a deal is that? It is a big enough deal that since about the early 1980s, we have given land back to nature that used to be agricultural land. We have given land back to nature equal in size, not to Washington, D.C., but to the state of Washington. We simply don't need that land anymore. We give it back to nature, let the plants and the animals come back. If you look at almost any other natural resource, you see the same pattern. The relationship used to be 1 for 1, and now it's decoupling pretty radically. Here is 115 years of economic growth in America. Here's how much paper in total we use in the country. Here's how much wood we use in total in the country. We keep on seeing the decoupling happening. If we look at manufacturing, America manufacturing continues to increase. Our total use of metals has hit a plateau, and it's now going down over time. I started off by talking about energy, so let's go back there. Here's 217 years of American economic growth. Here's what our energy use looked like for 170 of those years. A perfect relationship with economic growth. Here's what's happened since then. We have almost completely decoupled our prosperity, our economic growth, from using more energy, taking more fossil fuels, and burning more energy. As a result, our CO2 emissions have now stabilized, and in most of the rich world, they are now going down. Now, I want to be clear, they're not going down quickly enough. Global warming is a real problem, it's a serious problem, and it's our problem. But we have passed the point of peak emissions in many countries. We know how to do this. The problem is that, for me, the pessimism continues. And even today, even in the face of all of this evidence, we still hear profound pessimism, and we hear the same things that we were hearing 50 years ago. We hear that growth can't continue. We hear that we're going to exhaust all of our resources, and we hear that this enterprise that we are all engaged in, of generating prosperity and generating a higher standard of living, this is a fairy tale. This will not work. I think it's very important that we stop listening to this and that we keep embracing what we're doing, which is innovating and generating prosperity and building technologies that allow us to tread more lightly on the earth and to live better lives on a healthier planet. Here's the pessimism I'm fighting against. I was giving a talk about this in Germany last year, and on my way to give the talk, I walked by graffiti that says, "Smash capitalism, save the planet." This is the worst advice we could possibly follow. We have to accelerate what we're doing, not radically change direction. So, how are we doing? Is the innovation continuing? Should we be optimistic, or should we be pessimistic about the state of innovation? I want to give us some grounds for optimism. Here's a chart that I came across a little while back showing how much countries around the world spend on R&D. So several countries, the first line is the percent of the economy spent on R&D in 2000. That blue line is the same number in 2019. In most of the rich countries of the world, even though our economies are much bigger than they were 20 years ago, we are spending a greater proportion of our economic output on these fundamental activities of research, technology development, and innovation. Everyone in this room knows that we have been in an extraordinarily productive, healthy environment for fundraising risky entrepreneurial endeavors. VC investment has never been higher than it's been in the past few years. And we're seeing some of the results of this. One of the greatest challenges in biology has been trying to figure out how proteins fold. The cells in our body are essentially assembly lines for proteins, but we didn't know the rules by which the protein got into its final three-dimensional shape. So we still don't know the rules. What's amazing to me is that we built technologies that figured out the rules on their own. So we've heard about some of the protein folding triumphs. This is one of the more recent ventures that's been launched. Its goal is to figure out what happens when two proteins come together. How does that geometry work? That's going to let us design much better drugs. The old joke about nuclear fusion is that it's 20 years away and has been for the past 60 years. I actually think it's shorter than 20 years away now, finally. We're seeing excitement and investment in many different sectors that's going to bring us through the energy transition and let us get out of this bad habit that we have of burning fossil fuels to generate our economic growth. We are going to live through the energy transition of the 21st century. And everyone here knows that we have lived through 2 very difficult years because of the COVID pandemic. Think how much more difficult those years would have been and how much longer we would be living through this if we hadn't developed a vaccine in absolute record time. Look how long it took us to get a polio vaccine or a vaccine for yellow fever. We got a vaccine that works for a completely new pathogen and got it distributed around the world in under 2 years. This is an amazing accomplishment, and I think it's easy to forget it. So I want to say a couple things in conclusion, and then let's keep the conversation going. I'm not trying to be blandly optimistic. We face real challenges in the 21st century. We have to stop cooking our planet. We know that we're going to face more pandemics, and we have to be ready for them. And there's still too much sickness and disease and poverty around the world. We have billions of people who we need to lift up. So we face no shortage of challenges. The point that I want to make, and the thing that I've become convinced of because of my work over the past 25 years, we have all the tools we need to meet our challenges and to conquer them. The best combination for taking better care of ourselves and taking better care of our planet is a combination of tech progress, of markets, and of competition. If we're successful at bringing those things together and focusing them on our challenges, I'm actually very confident we're going to succeed. And so instead of being a pessimist or instead of being a utopian, I think the right thing for us is to be mindful optimists, mindful that we face challenges, but optimistic that we can meet them. And the fundamental reason that I'm optimistic is that as I've looked at the evidence about our ability to rise to our deepest challenges, I walk away unbelievably impressed by what we've been able to accomplish, and I actually walk away fairly optimistic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew, for that terrific overview. I couldn't help thinking while you were speaking about how Europe has actually been doing following this whole philosophy of trying to do more with less for, I don't know, 20, 25 years. And now this whole situation with Ukraine has kind of speeded things up in a kind of move fast and break things kind of way. So let me ask you, Pierre.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true, Jennifer. I mean, Europe has been doing this for 20, 25 years. Brian Garnier has been helping many of those companies. Plastics recycling, names like Carbios and Avantium, hydrogen. Brian Garnier took the first company public in hydrogen in 2014. So, it's kind of true. A lot of that stuff's actually been happening here. Yeah.
And also,
I think two things are important here, because you asked this fundamental question. We have to bring along the energy transition more quickly.
Yeah.
For the good of the planet, for geopolitical stability, to prevent acts of aggression like the invasion of Ukraine.
Yep.
We need to make the world less dependent on fossil fuels.
Yep.
And I agree with your firm. The right way to do that is to take a portfolio approach. We don't know what the right answer is yet exactly. You need lots of shots on goal, and you need to be funding lots of different ideas. Some of them are going to work out.
Absolutely.
And the other thing I wanted to mention that has been big here in Europe for a while is circular economy. I mean, right here in France, we have a company called Back Market that refurbishes electronics, and they're now worth over $5 billion. They're spreading around the world, including in Asia and the United States. And their closest competitor, who's another European company called Refurb, is now branching out from electronics into recycling clothes and furniture. So we're seeing new business models, and I think that's an area that Brian Garnier has also been very active in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, circular economy, we've backed some of these companies that you've mentioned, Refurb, Carbios, this is recycling of plastics, another company called Avantium out of the Netherlands that's actually creating an entire new polymer to replace plastics. I mean, there's a lot of innovation happening, a lot of very much aligned with what you were saying about doing more with less, in particular in the planet.
And in particular on that, one of the huge trends that I've noticed is consumers are refusing to buy from companies that they feel are doing the wrong thing for the planet. It's just in addition to being a bad idea for all the other reasons, it's terrible marketing.
Exactly. Yep.
So, staying on this theme of energy transition, Andrew, what role do you see AI playing in helping us get to a net zero environment?
It's going to play a fundamental role, but I don't know what that role is. But I'm not that bothered about that. The way I think about artificial intelligence is that we have invented the single most powerful tool that we've ever seen to help us with our most difficult challenges. And reason I believe that is that we have a colleague now. And it's not sentient, it's not a human being. All that is, I think that's really, really silly. It's not going to rise up and enslave us. I like science fiction movies. Let's not confuse them with reality. But what we have is a different kind of intelligence, or a different ability to look at a problem and to figure out what's going on. That's what I said with protein folding. We human beings still don't know how it works. Sure. Our machines understand that better than we do. When it comes to nuclear fusion, or when it comes to all the different varieties of nuclear fission that are being proposed, we need that kind of intelligence. We need that colleague to help us crack these unbelievably difficult science and engineering problems.
So we see AI playing a role in the energy transition, in drug development and health. What are some of the other areas?
I mean, fill in the blank. To me, it's kind of like asking, where will the spreadsheet have an impact?
Yeah.
There's no part of the world, there's no part of the modern economy where the spreadsheet has not had an impact. My guess is you've spent a few hours looking in spreadsheets.
Yeah, we kind of use those here and there at Brian Garnier.
So
AI is the same thing, but it's different because we have to tell the spreadsheet what to do, how to solve the problem. We don't have to tell artificial intelligence how to solve the problem. All we have to do is show it what we want to accomplish, give it a bunch of examples, and watch it figure things out.
So, being in the position you're in at MIT, you have a front row seat on, what's next. Tell us what the buzz is in Silicon Valley and at MIT. What are people excited about these days?
Let me start with the thing that we're all excited about that we should not be excited about.
Okay.
And you've heard of these large language models for artificial intelligence that can do this amazing job. If you give it a prompt, it will write a short story. It will complete an essay for you. And a couple people have said, after they've interacted with these kinds of technologies, I think this is a conscious entity. I think this is a sentient being.
Yeah.
I want to be really clear about this. No, it's not. We have created the world's most amazing autocomplete, trained on a huge amount of what humanity has written down. Okay, that's an amazing accomplishment. That is very different than what's going on up here. So I'm tired of this flavor of kind of, it's either religious or it is fear-mongering about AI. And the reason it upsets me is, as I said earlier, we have challenges we need to solve. We don't need to demonize this tool or make it into a religion. We need to put it to use.
Okay, so let's stay on this theme of disruption. You have said publicly that you think that there's a lot more disruption to come.
Yeah.
Are companies ready for this?
No, because the company is the thing that's going to get disrupted. So one of the things that I'm most excited about these days is the fact that I think the company has recently received an upgrade. And I do not mean by that the DAO, the distributed autonomous organization, some of these Web3 visions. I'm skeptical about those, but I'm really incredibly optimistic about the new crop of companies out there, many of which you're funding right now, that are just doing things differently and better. Let me tell you one of my favorite stories. I'm working on a book about this now, and I interviewed a guy named Will Marshall, who used to be a scientist at NASA. And he got trained how to put a spacecraft up into orbit, and it's really difficult, and NASA is pretty good at it. But Will, after working there for a few years, said, I think we like planning too much. Now, you have to do a lot of planning before you can just launch a satellite. You can't do that without a lot of careful analysis and planning. But Marshall said, I think we've gone too far. And he said to his colleagues, I think we can land a satellite on the moon for $100 million. And they laughed at him. They said, look, it costs $1 billion to land something on the moon. So he got somebody who believed in him. He got kind of an internal venture capitalist, and they said, okay, fine, demonstrate something to us. And so Will and his colleagues went to Radio Shack, or these days Amazon, and they bought a bunch of off-the-shelf components, and they found a little piece of real estate, and they built a lunar descent testing module for $300,000. And at that point, NASA said, you've done the hardest part. We're going to give you $80 million. Show us what you can do. And they put an $80 million spaceship on the surface of the moon. They weren't done yet. Because, again, I'm going to pull my phone out. What Will said to me when I interviewed him was, this is kind of a communication satellite. It's got a radio. It's got a camera. It's got a motion picture camera. It's got accelerometers. It's got a GPS in it. He said the bill of materials with this and a communication satellite is about 90% overlap. And here's the important part. He said this costs about $500. That costs about $500 million. What are those extra 6 zeros doing for us? So he started a company called Planet that's taking some of those zeros off, and they build satellites that are a lot closer to this, and they put them up in the air for about 1,000-fold cost advantage over NASA. They scan the Earth every day. These satellites are cheap. If they break, nobody cares because there's a lot of them. And every 3 months, they put a new batch of satellites up, and they iterate on a 3-month cycle as opposed to a 5 or 6 year cycle. That's the kind of disruption that I'm talking about.
Wow.
It's going to happen over and over and over.
So how do you see the future of work? And how, a lot of people are worried about being replaced by the machines. You wrote 2 books with machine in the titles.
3 total.
3. Okay, so how do you see this race between man and machine?
The more I learn and the more experience I get, the more convinced I am that the future is going to be a lot like the present, and that we're going to have humans and machines, minds and machines, bodies and machines collaborating with each other. They're going to do it in different ways than they are today. We're going to use these amazing large language models. We're going to use robots. We're going to use all kinds of technology. But I'm not worried about mass unemployment 5 years or 10 years from now. I'm fundamentally excited about watching the new collaborations between human beings and machines.
So it's really this whole question of, human ingenuity married with the latest technology.
Extraordinarily powerful tools and technologies. I will bet on that all day long.
And maybe that's a perfect segue. Guys, as you've heard from Andrew, we've got something very special for you guys. One second. All this capital and all this brain power is being used to go far to Mars and grow plants on the moon and just do these very complex things. But what we have for you now is someone who used his brain power and his founder's brain power to do something incredibly simple and restoring human motion. So please welcome Matthew Maslin, co-founder of Wondercraft, on stage, please.